But I talk in my classes about the need for universal health versus universal healthcare. Because in the state of Oregon, we just passed, I think it was about 3 years ago, a change in the Constitution that states that universal healthcare is a fundamental human right. And yeah, it's a right, but then also you got to consider what's the cost that comes with that. And the more important right is that we all have a right to health.
True.
And
absolutely.
It's a lot cheaper to make people healthy than it is to make people unhealthy, less sick for a while, because we don't cure anything in the hospital. All we're doing is putting Band-Aids on things. We don't go to the source of the problem. And that's really what this podcast is all about, is how do we get the front end fixed so that less people are going to be sick? And, if we're living longer as younger people, not sick people.
That's why I love about your show. I listened to a lot of podcasts that you have put out and aired. And I had a podcast a while ago called Healthcare 360. I had to pull the cord because I had just had a different family. I have 4 children that are still in college going through so it, as you know, it takes a lot of time. So it was, if you hear my cat, I'm sorry. She absolutely loves me. So I know the amount of time and effort in actually, like, at the same time, I guess with the discipline that's required to put on such a high performing show like yours and getting good guests that know what they're talking about and they can move the health needle for people. So I'm not one of the big, and I don't want to use his name, I actually do enjoy Sean Ryan, but the big podcasts on the healthcare stuff, they talk about fluff. They're talking about stuff that's nonsense. Period, full stop. Your show should be pushed to the masses because you're talking about objects and items and just everyday situations that can be controlled and implemented. And if they had used common sense, then we would have less issues. Other people are talking about, hey, how do you use GLP-1 and manage your blah, blah, blah. I'm like, come on, bro. I'm like, get out of the indoctrination of the whole GLP-1 thing already. I mean, and when we get into the app, when we talked about My Deficiencies, about like that stuff in there, it's mind-blowing, like what it does. So, so I have a lot of different things we can talk about. I mean, I have well-versed and talked about all these different examples and stories and stuff like that. So I'm excited.
Well, let's jump into this. We often think of aging as inevitable decline, but what if much of what we call aging is actually the cumulative effect of unrecognized deficiencies, nutrients our bodies quietly run out of over time? Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. In this episode, we're exploring how artificial intelligence is helping us identify and correct the hidden nutrient gap that holds back healing, performance, and longevity. My guest, Scott Burgess, is a naturopath and holistic health coach who created My Deficiencies, the first AI-powered nutrient depletion analyzer built entirely on peer-reviewed science. His work bridges natural medicine, data-driven technology, and personalized wellness, showing that replenishment, not restriction, may be the key to aging well. The Aging Well podcast encourages informed decision-making and always consult your physician and scientific literature when making decisions about your health. So, Scott, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. And so let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself. You've done a little bit of that already, and I think I'm going to play that into a prelude to the podcast. But tell us about yourself and how you came to bring AI and nutrition together.
All right. I'm going to give the abbreviated version, and then I'll probably just tease a little bit. So I'm from Boston, so I have my car at Harvard Yard. But originally was born and raised in Boston, went to Northeastern University, grew up there, met my wife. We both went through neuroanatomy, sports medicine. She graduated with a MBA. I graduated with a business minor on top of all the sports medicine and healthcare stuff that we had done. And from there, this is I won't mention the name of my daughter, but when we were having our first daughter, when we were becoming new parents, we were living in Derry, New Hampshire at the time, and I was a specialty lecturer at Northeastern University, and my wife was getting her MBA, and she was working in the department that she graduated from in the sports medicine. And 34 weeks pregnant, she got in a hit-and-run car accident.
Oh.
And it wasn't like a really bad accident. So she was able to call me. She was scared. She was shaken up. Police came and they brought her right to the hospital. And as they were monitoring my wife and my daughter, they found out that my daughter, her placenta, partially ruptured from the wall. So they had to do an emergency C-section. And now at that point, I had been inside healthcare. So for, like I mentioned a moment ago in our pre-conversation, was I was in healthcare designing operating rooms, hybrid ORs, every clinical space inside of a patient tower. I would work on the CADs and the drawings and the design work, and I would meet with the clinical staff, and I would do everything with and alongside the engineers and the architects. And it was really, really fun. I enjoyed it. And that part of my life, I believed I was contributing to the positivity of what health was. I really was like, okay, yeah, I still do believe that today, but it's only under the caveat is if someone's going to die if they don't have those services. There's you can avoid that, but I'll get into that. So my daughter was born 6 weeks early. She was in the NICU for probably about 4 weeks, like 4.5 weeks around there, and brought her home. Everything was great. I mean, we were new parents. We were on top of the world, and everything was great. My daughter was alive, and it happened a little bit differently than we wanted to, but the outcome was, hey, my daughter's home, my wife's home, everyone's safe, we're a family. And then we started noticing over the months that things were changing with my daughter, and started having projectile vomiting. She couldn't hold down foods. She had awful diaper rash. I'm talking like burning, like it was that acidy. So oftentimes we would have to leave her naked. It would be really difficult because you have a moving, rolling baby to have her butt in the sun so the sun could heal it and dry her skin. Now, my wife is brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. She wrote a short thesis of just recorded everything, what was going on and how it was happening. So we started looking into specialists, people who can help us, whether it's food allergy, whether something else going on, and no one can give us a straight answer. It must be this, it must be that. A lot of people that were crazy. A lot of people were not giving us the time of day. They were like, hey, like, there's nothing wrong here. You two are out of your mind. And we're like, no. So we didn't have the technology in our hands that we had back then. So I'll remember the old Sony Mavic camera where you can put like a floppy disk in there and it would record it. I had to use one of those so I could give him the disc and say, look, this is my daughter vomiting. Like it was going everywhere. And he was like, oh my gosh, like if I hadn't seen that, we wouldn't have believed it. So we met this one doctor. His name is Dr. Bach out of Rhinebeck, New York. And he was an MD. But he was also what we would consider to like a holistic doctor. And we started treating her with vitamin B12 shots and different things like that. And in today's environment, what I know about what we'll talk about with My Deficiencies, it moved the needle. It helped her, but it wasn't, I wouldn't have done it again. But at the time, it was the best choice that we had because we didn't know anything and we were scared. So at that point, moving on, then my daughter got pneumonia. And our mentality at that point, my wife and I, was that no vaccines, no antibiotics. We just don't know what's happening. And she had one treatment of a vaccine round in the beginning, and that's kind of what set things off a little bit. Now, going back to the hospital when she was just born, before she had a sip of milk, before she had a sip of water, any like natural earthly fluid, she was given an antibiotic shot in her leg that we found out. So imagine flipping, twisting, rotating, and circling your entire immune system out of the gate. And that's what set it off. When we had to bring her to the hospital because she ended up developing pneumonia, and Dr. Bach says, look, you have to give her an antibiotic. If not, it could develop and get worse. And up to this point, she was about 2.5 years old now. She hadn't really said many words beside hi, mama, like little mumbling words. And we would read to her every day. And we would read her entire books over and over and over, just like any parent would. And after one day of antibiotics, she came back and she goes, hey, Daddy, can you read me my story? I literally broke down crying. It was unreal. And I was like, what just happened? So my wife and I raced to the phone, called Dr. Bach. We said, she just spoke. We brought her to the hospital, 1 day of treatment. She just spoke. This is what happened. And at that point, he said, yeah. I said, I think I know what it is. I'll get right back with you. So he did his due diligence. He came back and he said, yeah, there was an underlying virus called pandas. And right from that point on, I made a personal commitment that would never happen to one of my children again, or anyone in my family. And that's when my company Balance was born. And that's how everything started. So it started out of just this underlying desire, like how dare you, without our consent, or it was rage at first, but now it's a mission. And I obsessed. You know how you hear about people on social media, like you have to, I watch one TV show at night. All I do is read articles. All I do is watch video. All I do is watch seminars. I don't do anything else besides this one point. And we nailed it so much where we just had a case study, Jeff, where we had someone who had a diabetic wound, who has type 2 diabetes for over 15 years, had a diabetic wound for, a little bit over 16 months, closed it in 27 days.
Wow.
Absolutely nailed it. And up until this point, we had been just putting together information, and almost to analysis paralysis, because you can go in and you can say, like, how does this work, or what's going on here, and what's the underlier? And I know everyone has, that's in the medical world has, oh, it must be this or it must be that. The underlying problem for everything, in my opinion, is that everyone's electrically dehydrated. Now, whether it's magnesiums or low peptides, or it's a microbiome disorder or a copper issue, whatever it may be, those are nothing more than symptoms to the overall cause of dehydration. Because if you cannot create energy, and just think of a car battery, like you have a positive lead and you have a negative lead that goes into water, and that creates current, right? So if you don't have enough water in your body, you can't create current, can't have energy. If you can't have energy, you feel like crap. Done. And so now it's the proving to everybody to get away from doctors who are not serving them in the correct manner, to say, no, hold on, look, take a time out, look at it this way, look at it that way. And you really have to get very creative with storytelling, for one, and then showing proof. Some people like hey, this is the way it's done. Like, I like that stuff with my old football coaches in college, like, do it this way. Cool, I'm in, I'm there. Some people need a little bit more coercing, some more like nurturing, some more like, okay, now I understand, because they're scared, and rightfully so, because if not, what's going to happen if I don't do this? My doctor said this, or my practitioner said this, or my personal trainer said that, because they have a rapport with them, they have a trust, and I get it. But a lot of the times, I'll show them. So that's how I came up with My Deficiencies. My Deficiencies was accumulation of all this work over that much time from my original story. And then from when my daughter was in the hospital up until I kept working in healthcare, again, designing all those spaces and rooms, and I saw a lot. And the one thing that I did notice a lot was that the system's not broken. It's working as designed to keep you sick, or if you're not going to remain sick, they keep a wire line directly to your purse, period. I was on the inside. I know it. I've seen it. There's no one who can argue with that, and I can prove it at any moment. When I was consulting, I got a call. We had just finished a hybrid OR, and I got a call from the business manager. And what was happening was that person said, hey, can you run a Cat 6 line? And I said, sure, no problem. I said, let me call in service. We'll take care of it. And just let me know what it's for. So we're just talking. And he says, yeah, we figured out that if we can run a Cat 6 line to our recording device, we can then move that information to the EMR, and we can bill an additional $15,000. And I was like, wait a minute, time out. You're doing what? So they found a different way and a different business model just to make more revenue by some different connectivities between modalities in the EMR systems, or the epics within the healthcare system. That's what's really going on. And it's I know what you were saying earlier about healthcare is making better systems and making people more aware. But as soon as capitalism is removed from healthcare, then the whole paradigm will shift, and people will use it for what it's worth and what it's needed for, versus the money model that it's designed against right now.
We'll probably come back to that, but are you that optimistic that we can actually accomplish that?
I do. And here's why, because what I've noticed a lot personally is there's a lot of pioneers like yourself, like me and other folks that are waking up, and the message is becoming very, very strong. And the messaging is not like, oh, you need to do these 3 things, or, if you want to do these 5, because it's all jargon. It doesn't move the needle. The carbon breakdown of the body is the same across everybody. Okay, so it's bacteria, then it goes to fungus and yeast, then mold, and then dust. Dust to dust, ash to the ashes. Once we shall return. No one's changing that. That's God's law, right? So it's everything else in between. Everyone kind of finds a way in a symptom. So the more of us that are pioneering the change, it will and has to change. I laugh at a lot of news feeds that are out there in the clips of, oh, we're making Wegovy and all these GLP-1s more affordable. No, they're not making them more affordable. They're making people richer. It's nothing more than a decoy and a lie. And it's time that people actually wake up, because we were never designed as humans to have an injectable shot. Imagine this for a moment. This is how I think, but this is like actually how I think all the time. Imagine you were a Native American and you were living 100 years ago, 150 years ago. You didn't have this technology. I mean, where's your GLP-1 shot? Like, what are you going to do with that kind of stuff? So it's nothing more than propaganda at its best. And I don't even like talking about the negative stuff, because I just want to talk about, hey, look, it's long term, it's not going to last and work, and here's why. And then once they learn why, they go, oh my gosh. I go, yeah, you're painting over rust, man. Like, let's not paint over rust. Let's sandblast that shit. Let's get all the rust off of it. Let's prime it. Let's paint it. And then let's powder coat it so it never leaks through ever again. And they're like, that's what I want. And that's how like from how I got into this, and why you can probably see like how passionate I am about this as far as helping them move the needle for people, because there's so much conflicting information. And like I was mentioning about answerthepublic.com, information overload is the number one reason why people stay stuck. They don't know what to do. And because they don't know what to do, they're afraid to act and move, because they are afraid if they have to stop taking the medication, or if they have to stop following a suggestion and then a prescription, what's going to be the outcome? And then the last part, which is the reality, is some people are just lazy. They just like, oh, I'll be fine. Everything's working. I'm good. And that in itself is another part of the problem, because then it makes people who are pioneering, like yourself and myself, not have to work with those people, but it takes attention away from people who really need the help, who could have avoided it. In a nutshell, I guess.
If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast. So let's dive in a little bit to your software, My Deficiencies. And before we kind of get into that technology, can you explain how nutrient depletion develops in the first place, and why is it often missed in many of our standard lab workups patients get?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen in the research that I've now again, like you look like a Peter Attia, or like a Martha Carlin, those people who have been on big stages and spoken about, either they're using real data or they're not. It basically comes down to the soil being depleted at the end of the day. Stephanie Seenoff wrote a significant amount of articles, has pushed a lot of just federal law or bringing awareness to that about glyphosate and different chemicals. And glyphosate is just taking the hit. There's way worse chemicals, by the way, than glyphosate that are out there. So what's happening is the ground's just depleted. And more importantly to that, you have the mycelium of the ground is being affected as well, which is the key mover. So when the nutrients aren't there, they cannot then produce water in the body through structured water, because the foods don't have. Every food has a different component of what you call cellular salts. Okay, and there was a German engineer long time ago. I think it was about 100 years ago. So he came. I think it was Schulister, if I'm pronouncing the correct way, but he figured out that foods had a different dynamic of a cellular salt. And when you mix all of those together, it creates intracellular hydration. So what ends up happening is that when the internal part of the cell becomes dehydrated, then the outside of the cell becomes flooded. We call that flooding inflammation. So outside of air, poor nutrient density in the soils, not properly rolling the crops, retiring the crops, composting correctly, and reusing. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by like retiring soils. Like right now, like my yard, most people would consider it a mess because there's leaves everywhere. Now, I have one big oak tree that never finishes falling until the end of December. But the thing is, once those leaves fall, those leaves provide nutrients to the ground. My ducks give me all winter long, give me 12 eggs every day because that ground is dense. We don't use any chemicals. We don't use anything else. So naturally, when I looked at what do the Native Americans do, that's why I mentioned earlier, like this is kind of the essence of where my mind is all the time, is they use natural resources to re-fertilize, to recompost, and to reinvigorate the grounds and the soils. So when we grow food, it's abundant. When our ducks, we of course we give them some duck food to kind of offset in between, but we let them forage all the time naturally. That's what's wrong with our food source. The result of that is when you get the blood work done, they're looking at different markers. And I remember when I had my podcast a while ago, we had this one gentleman, his name was Dr. Chris Davis. Most labs, the way they've been, I guess, standardized against their metrics is non-optimized. He goes, so if 99% of the population is here, do you really want to be with everyone else, considering that most of them are fat, obese, have heart disease and diabetes? I'm like, no. So he goes, yeah, you want to be in that 1% category. So, and that's where the whole supplementation push came in and everything else. But then when people get labs back and I'm showing deficiencies in zinc or vitamin D or whatever it may be, vitamin D is always the big one that people talk about. And then they look at the manufacturing process. I don't know one company that I can honestly say, and I've looked at all of them, where it's very, very good long-term, because it's still manufactured. It was never designed to be manufactured. And it's a hormone, by the way. Most people call it vitamin D, but everyone knows it's a hormone at this point. So that's where I believe where the nutrition deficit's coming from, how it regulates back to the labs, and what the non-optimized metric in that standard is what people, it's like a false hope, if you will, versus it being optimized in relationship to hydration.
Yeah, that whole idea of the normalizing of the data has come up frequently on this podcast, where it's like, do we really want to be normal when normal anymore is increasingly sick? It's like,
yeah, exactly. There was I saw a podcast a couple of years back. His doctor's name was Dr. Perlmutter. So it's Pearl and then Mutter. And he was talking about uric acid. And that was when uric acid became like a whole big thing, right? Up there on my screen. Okay. And they were talking about fructose and the whole 9 yards. And I was like, man, like he's way off. Like we've known for decades how bad corn syrup is, fructose, sucrose. And we had another person who was on the show. When they had this one, it was called Neuromint. And it was one of the first products that had L-theanine in it, and it was great. Once they sold their company, I forget who they sold to, they added sucralose. And I'm like, man, and people were like, well, what's the big deal with sucralose? I said, well, if you look at the data, it causes cancer in rats. Pause. I'm like, any questions on that? So all these different additives in the preservatives, they're wiping out our natural mitochondria. Morley Robbins did a great job of breaking that all down, what's happening at the mitochondrial level. I don't know anyone better that has done that as far as Morley. And he owns that topic when it comes down to proper metabolism and what's breaking down the mitochondrial function in the kinetic chain, or the mitochondrial chain for that matter, in the body, coming down from it. But all those additives, preservatives, they're not designed that way. And the best way when I describe this to clients is I go, look, imagine you have a beautiful swimming pool in your backyard. They're like, okay, yeah. I said, imagine that. It's small little crystal waves. It's 80 degrees out. What's keeping that pool clean? They go, oh, well, the chlorine. I said, right. What's chlorine? Oh, it's preservative. Right. So it's basically eating up and gobbling up all the natural bacteria that's outside in the air. Yeah. Okay. So when you go and you eat that food that has citric acid or ascorbic acid or, the potassium bromate that's inside of it as a preservative that's supposed to keep it an extended shelf life, what do you think it's doing to your digestive tract? And they go, oh. I go, right. I go, so then you wonder why you're having digestion issues, because those natural, preservatives are wiping everything out. And they go, oh, okay. And I go, right. So I talk about Patrick Flanagan a lot. Long time ago, early 80s, who's very, very popularized. He had a book called, I forget his name, was Elixir of the Ages was the book that he wrote about negative hydrogen electricity within the body. And basically, this is going to go back to the question, when we pick food from a tree or from a plant, it has all the abundance in the world, has that negative ion charge through hydrogen in that food. The longer that time frame extends from when it was picked to the shelf life is how much that charge depletes going down. And that's what's really, really important to understand with people. So it's important to have your, I would say, like a regenerative farmer that people know, where they know that they're properly retiring soils, composting those soils, rolling the soils properly. So they're getting nutrient dense food, so they don't have to eat as much. Because what's end up happening when people have to eat as much as they do, it causes apoptosis, overeating, and then it shuts down the spleen, and it sets off a whole other cascade of what's happening. And that's in a kind of like in a juggling game of what's going on with that one question, if I'm being honest with it.
Wow. So what are some of the most common deficiencies that you do see in adults over 40, and how do those go on to affect our aging, our recovery, and our overall energy levels? I know you mentioned copper and Morley Robbins, and we had Morley on recently. But what are some other deficiencies to consider?
I would say glycine is probably a big one. And it sets off the entire. So we have a mushroom product line as well. We have like one of the worst business models in the world, and I joke about it all the time because we use our mushroom products as a stopgap. So if someone's in a weakened health position, we use that to get them from here to there. And usually we only suggest it for like one round just to get them to bridge that gap. I say, in my opinion, glycine is a big one. Obviously, you have copper, which is another big one. But overall, the biggest that I see is salt. People do not have enough salt in their body. My blood pressure is perfect. I'm 51 now. I'll tell you a quick joke. I'm reversing age. So I turned 50 twice in my house because every year we're like, how old am I this year? So my wife goes, well, look, if you go backwards in ages, now you know how much longer you have to live if you're going to die at 100. And I was like, oh, right, let's do that. So anyways, I would say salt is the biggest one. Salt is the biggest commodity. It's forever. It's been the number one selling trace mineral in the world. It still is. The difference is making sure that who you trust and buy from, that it's not loaded with lead. Because if you want to get true Celtic or mineral dense salt, and they're using a metal rake, metal and salt don't usually jive. They usually cause corrosion. That corrosion then has flake off. That flake off then gets into the product, right? Or if they're using a blasting technique for Himalayan, if they're using dynamite, stuff like that, you have all those extra compounds that are not naturally there. You want wood raked only trace mineral dense Celtic sea salts, the best you can get. And preferably because of what different practices people are using or the tools they have available to them based on whatever country they're in, you want to get it there lab tested the best as you can. There's a couple companies that I trust, but I still, every I don't know, 3 to 4 months, I'll do my own little lead test, a little dipstick, just to kind of see where it's at. What people say and what's real are two different things. And that's where discernment comes in with most of the stuff.
So a salt deficiency, we tend to talk so much about there being too much salt in our food.
Mm-hmm.
So where's that deficiency come in?
So I would say, go back to the cellulose salts. So I had, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, he is probably the world's best known water fasting, intermittently fasting doctor that's out there. And I remember when he was on the show, he was talking about, I think you don't need any salt. And I said, well, I challenged that. And then we got into it and he explained, this is where I learned about cellulose salts and what he meant, but he wasn't really talking about it. Every food component, whether it's a plant or coming from a tree, it's integrating with the mycelium of the ground. That mycelium is breaking down the terrain as well as the rocks. The rocks are dense in minerals. And those different rocks are now absorbed into either the tree, the plant, or the produce that's coming up. So those different salts together is what causes that intracellular hydration that the body knows what to do with and then knows how to properly evacuate. That's a big part of the equation, is knowing how to evacuate something once you ingest it. So as we breathe in, we must breathe out. What comes in has to come out. And the body's not, the body's nothing more than a pile of tubes over 6 systems. And if you get a jam up there, it's like traffic on I-95 on the East Coast. You just don't want to be in it. It's a really bad day, and you're looking for a detour any way you can go. That detour typically is like a smaller vessel that can't handle that load, so it causes a jam up eventually there as well. That's why when people start feeling well by using supplementation or something else, that's that detour. But eventually that detour is going to clog up. But the salts, when you have salt from the ocean, which usually the real reason salt in the ocean is so great is because when you go into the ocean, it absorbs through the skin, which is fantastic. But if you're not near the ocean, what's the redundancy? Well, the redundancy is the cellulose salts that you get from the food, which is from the mycelium and from the rock beds and from the soil of the ground. And all the other issues, for example, in let's say like magnesium. Well, let's say vitamin D. If your vitamin A and D are not homeostatic, it cannot then lead into activating K2. If K2 can't activate, you can't metabolize metabolism. That goes into iron. That goes into ATP. ATP can't create energy. You can't create energy because there's no charge.
Yeah, that's one thing we don't really consider much, and we certainly don't teach it. I mean, magnesium and ATP never were put together for me as, all the way through to my PhD. And it wasn't really until about a year ago that it was connected to me that, you have that balance between calcium and magnesium gives us the proper muscle function. And when that's out of balance, you're going to have cramping if you don't have the magnesium to relax the muscle.
That's right. And most people are then going to a banana thinking it's potassium or something like that. And I'm like, no, get the salt in the system. But my doctor told me the salt is bad. It's not. And then the other part of it is the different levels of salt that are sold in the market. I'm going to pick on this one because I was pissed when I found out. But you ever heard of a Celtic sea salt called Flower of the Sea?
I've not heard of that one, no.
All right, so it's a white flake. It was originally sold at Whole Foods predominantly. It was definitely on Amazon and online in their own private website. Got popularized and started branching out to more regional grocery stores. Well, there was a lead-free, I think her name is leadfreemama.com. That's why I started learning about all the lead that's in all the supplementary foods. And she did a lead test on Celtic sea salt. And I was like, okay, which one? So she picked that brand. And it was, I think, like 10 times more than the legal amount that was on there. And I was like, oh my gosh. And here I am, I was trusting. But her analysis of that salt completely shifted my mental paradigm about how I look at products. So if someone makes a claim, I trust them, but then I also do my own testing down the road just to make sure. And the issue that comes up more time than not is that one word, time. I don't have the time to do this. That's why folks like you and I having platforms like this and being able to talk freely, people really should listen. And I wouldn't say it's our job, but it's our due diligence to make sure that if we're going to talk about something, we know what we're talking about, or we know people who've tested it, because there are a lot of people listening to the words that we're saying, and our impact becomes that more valuable. Because I'm not out here just trying to push and sell products. I don't technically want to do that all day. What I want people to do is, I need your help. Here's what my help is. And when you're done, come back if you need me. If not, tell someone who you love to come on over. That's my business model. Like I said, I have one of the worst business models in the world. We want people to come when they want to come, but we get more referrals because we do such a great job when we over deliver. And that's how it should be for everybody. But for you and I and other people that are out there, instead of focusing on the problem, I don't really care about that kind of stuff. I say, okay, that's cool, great, bravo. How do we know? And that's the only real valid question when you're working with people with their health. And going back to my healthcare career inside the hospital, the one thing I learned from all the surgeons and the architects and engineers was this. If you have something inside a room and you're going to install something and mount it to a ceiling, that's usually going to what they call to right iron or superstructure. Every bolt, every piece of all thread, every adapter or intermediate sandwich plate that goes up there, it has to be the exact one. If you're off by less than 1/4 of an inch, it's not going to work. That not working is equivalent to somewhere between $30,000 to $50,000 in construction time and downtime. The information that we're delivering to people with that level of detail of knowing how much lead is the difference of them feeling well and not feeling well. That's how I look at it and how I break everything down. So I go through things meticulously to find out, because if it doesn't work, then I don't know. Hold on, let me do a little bit more research on that. So I move quick. I move really, really fast. And which is why I obsess it and I don't waste my time on stuff that is not going to move the needle for me, especially not just for my family first, but then my business second. And that's why people trust me a lot on it.
So from a naturopathic and physiological standpoint, what's the connection between our nutrient status and our cellular repair or longevity?
Oh, well, I'll keep it simple. Don't poison yourself.
Okay.
And this is a tough one. I mean, it's a great question, by the way. And this is a hard answer because I don't really want to say it, but I think it's the truth, in my opinion, is I believe right now, based on the current conditions of our environment in major metropolitan and lesser metropolitan areas, more rural areas, that most people should be homesteading. Why I didn't want to say that is because I know most people don't have time. Most people are working a lot. They have family and friends or people they have to care for. Life happens, and to go out and be able to attend to a farm it can be difficult. And I know that it was popularized. It was pushed about a year ago on social media. Say, hey, you should start homesteading and do community-based stuff. It takes a lot of time. It really, really does. Even just like my ducks alone, like every morning, I go out there at 6. I let them out of their den because we live with a lot of wild animals, so they can get hurt if not. And we let them out of the den. I then have to spray it down. I harvest the eggs. Then I go out and I feed them. And then I created a little pond inside my yard that's 10 by 10, about 3 feet deep. So they have water so they can clean themselves. As dirty as those animals are, Jeff, they are the most cleanest animals I've ever been around. They're crazy. And they're so much fun. So the homesteading part of this is the tough part. So it's really important for them to, the people who are listening in the audience, go find a good homesteader. Go find a good regenerative farmer. Because if you can't homestead, I can't say. Now, the other way you can answer this question is if, like, we have Food Lion and Lowe's in my town. I have gone to the stores and found out where they bring in their produce from. what farms, what are their practices? Are they using the different chemicals, the herbicides, the pesticides, the insecticides? I've done that homework because it's that important to me. Now, most people are not going to do that because they don't have the time, or they don't know what questions to ask because it's just outside of their wheelhouse. It's not what their focus is. So homestead if you can. If not, trust a farmer who you have a relationship with, and that's where I would go and get your food from. Now, as far as longevity-wise, if you're eating in that manner with regenerative farmers or people who are homesteading, you're getting good food. If you're eating food that's at the supermarket, in grocery stores, most of us should know by now that most of that food is pre-picked, so it's not nutrient dense, it's nutrient light, which means you're going to have to eat a little bit more, which then talks about that word I talked about earlier, we go apoptosis. So as far as when it comes to longevity, that's the balance game. That's the tough part, which is why I was like, great question, but I'm like, I humbly have to answer it because it's like, I don't want to mislead anybody. That's really where we're at in our current state. And until the farming practices grossly change in our country where we know we're getting nutrient-dense food, yes, it'll have a shorter shelf life, but we should go be buying food like what we need for that day. And I just don't know if that balance between nutrient density being high and shelf life for these stores is ever going to balance out because things have to move really, really quickly.
What about for our urban viewers and listeners that, don't necessarily, they're living in apartments or they're living in, dense urban communities. What do you say to them in regards to, what you just said about homesteading?
I would say find the closest rural farm or area that has a farm stand or a farmer's market and go drive out there on the weekend and do your food shopping for that week. Or the other thing is, which is something, it all depends on, people's financial ability to do this. Was it Fresh Realm? Yeah, there's a company called Fresh Realm, and they're the first food prep company that I found that validates and verifies where they're getting their food from. And we were looking at it, my wife and I were looking at it yesterday, and I was like, something, that's a really cool company. Let me have that information. So of course, I went from 0 to 90 in a second, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually validating where they're getting their food from and how it's being produced. That's the other option, is the food prepping. But again, just having discernment of mind, you have to keep checking to make sure that those standards and those qualities are being maintained, because if they're being acquired or if there's a change of leadership at this one, company, like those people change their mind, change decisions, things pop up, so you have to do your due diligence there. And it's one of those questions where I don't have time. Again, it always comes down to time. We'll reserve some time, because if it's, what I tell a lot of folks is, if you don't put time into managing your health, then you're going to be putting money and time into managing your healthcare. It's just, it literally, it's a seesaw. It's one side or the other. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And I brought that up to just kind of underscore the importance of our communities and, our political makeup in this country to step in and be helping with this as well.
Yeah.
If we as communities recognize that accessibility to all this stuff is a critical issue when it comes to the health of the American people. And this is a global issue as well, although I would say probably most of our country, our brother and sister countries across the globe do it a little bit better than we do in the United States. They don't permit some of these chemicals to be put into food.
Yeah.
But, there's opportunities within urban areas to take over some of, I think Detroit started doing it a little bit more recently, where, you have all these properties that are just dilapidated, tear them down and turn them over into, community gardens. And again, you still have to, educate and manage how the soil is being treated and those types of things in order to maintain the quality of the food. But those are opportunities for us to get produce closer to individuals and teach young people about how important it is to get good, healthy food. And that, we live in the state of Oregon, and one of the most popular grocery stores here, I won't mention a name, but their advertisement is fresher than fresh. And I'm like, what bullshit is that? Because there's no way, what is fresher than fresh? It's just an oxymoron. And, for it to be fresher than fresh, it's still got to be on the tree, not ready to be picked.
I tell a lot of folks this. I go, look, marketing, and this actually came from Dr. Jack Krause. He's great, by the way. That guy just shoots off the cuff. Marketing is a legalized lying.
Oh, yeah.
And the other way I put it is, if you ever look at a medication or a synthetic and you look at the side effects, there's no such thing as a side effect. That's a marketing buffer to lower the blow. So it's a left hook versus the right hook, so you don't get knocked out. It's a direct effect. It's happening, period. And they go, I never really thought of it that way. I said, everything's marketing. And you could have a better product. Who said this? Darren Hardy, who owns Success Magazine. He said, you can have the absolute best product, but if you have a subpar marketing, the guy who has the lesser product is going to win every single time. Marketing is everything. So to your point, fresher than fresh, what the hell does that even mean?
It means nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
and
nonsense.
The scary thing is that they advertise low prices. And what my wife has found, that many of the foods that we will buy, we can get cheaper and better quality at Whole Foods. Like the eggs at Whole Foods. And I hate to announce this because their eggs are so incredibly awesome. I mean, you break one of those open, the yolk is just this dark reddish orange color. I mean, it's incredible. And they're cheaper than going to the bigger box stores and buying their eggs, which you open them up and there's this just pasty yellow kind of yolk to it that you wonder how long. Can I tell you
something about eggs that I learned with my ducks?
Sure.
Duck eggs are typically, healthy ducks, of course, are typically more nutrient dense than chicken eggs. They're also bigger. And they also have more fat. So gram for gram, there's more density in a duck egg. Now, this is something I learned. And I learned this from Nancy. She works at the Food Line. She's awesome. Every time we go there, she's there at the register. She takes our stuff from the stuff that we do buy from Food Line. And again, we did our homework over there. And I said, hey, she goes, hey, how are the little duckies doing? They're doing great. She said, hey, did you know this about duck eggs? And I said, no. She goes, well, let me ask you a question. Did you wash off the biofilm? And I said, well, we have been. I said, should we not do that? And she goes, no, never take off the biofilm. And I said, why? She goes, and she told me something, well, I'm not going to announce it, but she goes, I said, okay, what's the deal? She goes, when the biofilm comes off, the egg is porous. Everything's porous. So when the biofilm comes off, that's its natural protector to the yolk inside and the chick that could be developing. And I said, okay. So I'm still listening at this point. She goes, then once the biofilm's off, then it allows that porous design of that shell to absorb and now ebb and flow with its surrounding environment, which means that the air that's passing through it, if there's any bacteria, it's now getting into the yolk, into the protein. And I was like, no kidding. She's like, so get your eggs, do not wash the biofilm off, put them in a carton and leave them there until you're ready to eat them. Then when you're ready to eat them, wash them so your egg is completely protected. That's how you can get, so if you wash your eggs ahead of time, you're going to get 3 to 4 weeks of shelf life before they start floating and going bad. You'll get 6 to 8 weeks if the biofilm's on it and it's refrigerated. And I was like, no kidding. So then she says, when all the eggs are at the store, they're washing off the biofilm, and then they're usually using a chlorine bleach. Not every company does this. I think not Pasture, but the company Pasture Raised, they don't wash with chlorine. They do wash off the biofilm so they're clean, so people don't feel like they're, getting chicken shit on their eggs, right? So I was like, wow, I didn't know that. And it really moved the needle for me as far as how I look at food. And again, just a different layer. I was like, I never knew. So when you homestead, or if you're going to a regenerative farmer and they're selling eggs or duck eggs, always make sure that they have the biofilm on it. They'll last longer for you, one. And two, it's an absolute guarantee that that egg did not absorb external bacteria.
That is great advice for our viewers and listeners, and probably encouraging me to, when we buy our eggs, buy them from a local farmer directly rather than buying them from the store. Because at the store, no matter whether it's pasture, brown egg, white egg, whatever kind of egg it is, it's going to be washed like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, and this is not to scare people, this is just like another level of detail, because the reality is we do not know, because we're not there, of how that egg is cleaned, processed, handled, managed. We just don't know unless we ask the questions. And I trust this person, and I was like, no, she has her own chickens, and she said, hey, this is what we do and why we do it. And I was like, that is great advice. And because her husband's a farmer, and that's why I trust her.
So I think somebody that might be listening to this and, not watching the video might be thinking, you're sitting there, you're very like non-tech, you're back to the earth, this hippy dippy kind of individual. And that's not what I'm seeing here. And in fact, the reason we brought you on this podcast was to talk about your software, the My Deficiencies. And so let's kind of get these people from the old farming methods that are the healthiest for us into, this 21st century where AI is such a big issue for individuals. And I think it's almost got to be difficult for people to say, okay, how are we jumping from these restorative farming practices to AI? Yeah. But how does AI actually assess nutrient depletion, and what makes your approach different from traditional nutritional testing? So here's something really important, and this is something that I have repurposed in my own mindset as far as how I use it. If AI is not going to be replacing us, people who are using AI appropriately will be. My model with AI is using it appropriately. So as I built my knowledge base, and then I API'd all the cross references that have to interact with that knowledge base, it has to be accurate information. Now, I hope so far my story and my talking points has shown the level of diligence that I've gone through, even with the smallest minute detail, because it matters. Okay. So as I was developing My Deficiencies, which you can get on right now, we have the iOS app. I do not have a Linux or a Google Play app yet. We will be developing that. But what I did instead was I took my iOS app and I recoded it and I embedded it into my website. That way, anyone can get to it. And the best part is it's absolutely free. There's no cost. There's no email sign up. There's no funnel system that's on there. It's just free. So people can use it in real time. And my hope and goal with this, well, the original development of it was for me and the clients that I serve and I help, because they would come in and I would say, hey, so what goes in your mouth? Talk me through it. And so they would tell me and give me this whole list. And I would start going through and I'd have to do the research and the homework and find out what it's doing metabolically to the body. And I was like, man, I need a simple tool. I just need something that can work. And that's how it spawned and how it grew. So it's completely free. So you either go to the website and you go to the free app, and then it goes on the web portal and it's right there in front of you. We don't ask anything from anybody. The only thing I would ask is just use it responsibly. But I believe I put enough information there that it discourages people from using it irresponsibly. I don't even know how you could at this point. And then you can download it on the iOS store. So when I put it all together, it was just all my collective information about everything that I had gained and know and trust and verified. There's a lot of old information that's very, very good. I would say most information today, not all, but most, is nonsense. Anything after like 1954 is propaganda and over marketing and justified based on what I've seen and what I've read and what I've practiced. Everything before that, legitimate. And I go back to the core value of, like, how do the Native Americans live?
Like what was their special sauce? How do they live properly within the lands? And that's how the application to My Deficiencies went. So I looked at the practices of how supplements were designed, how they're manufactured, how they're stored, how they're shipped, the companies that are doing them, what's their shelf life, what's inside of them. All that information, boom, built into it. Then I API'd information from NIH, PubMed, Hippocrates, Walgreens, CVS, Drug Interaction Checker, and then on top of that, I found tried and true information as far as what deficiencies are out there, specifically with the microbiome. That was a real needle mover for us. And then I incorporated mycelium information in there from Dr. Chris Hobbs as far as what's happening, because essentially mycelium is the network of the world. Our brain and our gut together, the gut-brain axis, is the network of our body. There's no difference between the two. And we smash that in there as well. And I'm just giving very simple terms so I don't freak people out with all the advanced, technical terms so they can follow along. And then I said, someone has to be able to use this just by going up to it and knowing how to use it appropriately. So we made it so simple where all you need to do is type in the name of the medication, comma, space, the name of the medication, comma, space, supplement name, whatever it is. It can be a solo or a multiple medication supplement string. Enter. Let it rip. And then it will confirm the entries. It will confirm the summary report. And then by compound, it will then tell you the deficiency nutritionally that's being depleted from the body as a result of taking that compound. And then it gives you a complete summary analysis of all the compounds together. So I always pick on lisinopril. That's low-hanging fruit. So if someone has high blood pressure and you put in lisinopril, and most people are taking lisinopril, because if you look at the combination of how medications are once suggested and then prescribed, they usually go, especially with any kind of cardiovascular, it's a blood pressure and then a statin, right? Which we know now that is less than 1% effective in the world. So if you're using atorvastatin, which is the number one, or simvastatin, which is number 2 statin out there, you put any of those combinations, you have CoQ12, magnesium, zinc, and B6 gone. And then we emojified it where we had a red, orange, and then yellow emoji icon, let you know the severity. And then we have the compound effect built in there as well. Are you familiar with the compound effect?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the compound effect over time, and most people think, well, it's only a little amount. It's only a little amount. Yeah, but it's a penny a day equals 30 cents at the end of the month, times compound interest, which give you 42 cents. And then you go to 60 days, 90 days, and then eventually have $10 on saving pennies. And it's the same thing with taking these medications or synthetics. As you keep hitting zinc, magnesiums, CoQs, vitamin A, retinol, vitamin Ds, then you're slowly going down the hill and you're cruising as you're skiing, and then all of a sudden you hit a 45 degree and you can't handle the speed and you wipe out. That's essentially what's happening. So as we designed the app, it was all based on transparency, because Brent Lacey, who I mentioned earlier, who I had on my podcast a while ago, talked about that there's less than one, at that time at least. I know it's going to change now against what RFK is saying for the minimum requirement for doctors to have nutritional wise. That doesn't mean it's still going to be enough. But they had less than 1 credit hour of nutrition. We need to challenge the status quo, 1, and 2, we need to ask questions if we are going to trust those people who are there to help us. So if a doctor does not understand the nutritional impact, the mineral density impact to the body in relation to whatever they're suggesting at the prescription through ingestion, then we're in big, big trouble. Now, here's where it gets sideways, and it really is sideways. Inside the iOS app, I like playing games as I'm smiling. But this one I was being very serious with, but I was like, what if someone challenged this? What would it look like? And I then came about and I went, let's just overcome that objection right now. Let's just do it. So I got the federal laws and the federal regulations as it pertains for medications and supplements, and I put it right into the settings of the app. So someone can go to the settings of the My Deficiencies iOS app, or you can even go on the web portal and click on it. You can read all about what's there. And you can start to understand the regulatory gaps between what a supplement is, what a medication is, and why supplements are considered medications if they're interconnected. So here's what no one knows, or at least what no one's talking about at the minimum. If you're taking the lisinopril, for example, and you know that it's wiping out CoQ10, then most people say, well, I'm just going to go take CoQ10 as a supplement. Most people think supplement first because we've been trained to think, have a problem, take a pill, right? That's the model that's out there. So, but it's not the same because the manufacturing standards of developing CoQ10 are different because they don't happen naturally. They happen synthetically, okay? Now, the reason why a doctor can't say that, or why a pharmaceutical drug company cannot say, well, yeah, then we suggest you take this, because once that supplement rides the coattail of that medicine, that supplement now becomes a medication. So this is why they divert and separate. So they have to be independent from each other, which is why they're never talked about and they're never spoken to. Now, the real reason, in addition to this, is most of these supplement companies are owned and operated by the drug companies. So I don't want to take this medication. I want to do it the natural way. Well, guess what? They're not natural. They're synthetic. Your body doesn't know how to register. 1, 2, doesn't know how to evacuate from the body, which means it has what we call, I use this, I know it's not directly related to nutrient values, but I use a term called PECAO. PECAO is in relation to radioactive isotopes. So in Chernobyl, it wasn't the nuclear blast that wiped everyone out. It was a slow dose radiation fallout over time, that compound effect. So as you're slowly getting depleted and depleted and depleted, I don't know how this happened. I'm doing everything right. I'm eating well. I'm taking my vitamins and my minerals. I don't know how I got sick. Make sense? That's why, with just 100% conviction and making sure that I included everything inside of the app, that you can read the regulatory gaps, you can read the regulatory information in the federal laws, because you need to be informed, you need to know. And that's why and how I put everything together. Now, if someone doesn't understand how to read the report, because there are a lot of anatomical, like you and I would read it, no problem. It would be like second language for us, right? But if someone doesn't understand that language and it becomes overwhelming for them, when I go back to that topic about answerthepublic.com, as far as making information, not information overload, but accessible and usable, I have a conversation starter that I include in there, provide me an easy to read report. So it gets that information and I turn it into a 5th grade reading level. So it takes apoptosis and mitochondrial and different large words that frighten people because they don't understand their meaning or the intent behind the word, and we simplify it. We use words like energy and flow and water and hydration, so things that are more common that people can understand. And the hardest part with developing the app was that it needed to be any combination of suggested and then prescribed drugs, medications, because it's not just the doctors, by the way, because most people who are not feeling well, they're going to go see their doctor. Well, if someone's ambitious, so I'm going to go do something about this, I'm going to go hire a personal trainer. Well, most personal trainers believe in supplementation because they get paid for it mostly. Everything has to be considered. The whole paradigm has to be, okay, what am I dealing with? What am I looking at? And is this the right move and step? So when I was talking about us as pioneers and putting together our best information, so when we make our own suggestions and recommendations in getting this information out there, where are the gaps? One of my best friends, his name is Dwight, in one of the companies that I used to work at, formerly not anymore, but when we were working together there, I would call him up all the time and I would say, hey, where are my gaps, man? Like, what do we, because again, the ceiling work in these hospitals and these rooms, there's a lot of information to consider and to balance, especially against a construction Gantt schedule. So how do you balance that information? Where are your gap analysis? So I'd always go through and check everything out. And I'd go slow and methodical, which is now fast and methodical because I can do it quick. because once you understand the carbon cycle and how everything works in the body in relationship to that, that's how it all starts and begins and how everything works around it. That makes sense?
That makes perfect sense. I hope it makes sense for our viewers and listeners. But like you said, you can, dumb it down in the app a little bit. I shouldn't say dumb it down. It's because that sounds really derogatory to the people that need it.
Yeah, what it does, it just makes it more comprehensive. That's the more appropriate word. Is it definitely makes it simpler, where it's non-scary. And you say, you know something? Just like you didn't want that medication, I don't want those results either. So now what's my other choice? And that's what it's all about. And for the first time, Jeff, we have a tool in our pocket, whether you have an iOS device or not, because you can go to the website and it works just fine on your mobile phone. And in real time, you can get real information and you can have a real conversation. I mean, we even have people using it in the grocery store. So I had a client who had acute alopecia. And I was like, how did that happen? So he's like, well, I've been taking finasteride for 20 years. And I was like, hold on, time out. You've been taking finasteride, which is basically Propecia to help men grow hair. That caused acute alopecia? He's like, yeah. And so when I looked it up, it literally destroys fetuses. So if you're going to go donate blood or something like that, they won't accept your blood unless you have a script. That's how bad that drug is. So I put that drug into the application and we started working together. And then he went on the whole health train. Okay, he's like, look, I'm going organic, I'm eating clean, I'm going to change this. We grew his hair back in, I think, 5 weeks, right? So
can you do that? I was going to say, can you do that for me? But looking at you, it's like, no, you can't.
Well, I keep mine short on purpose. So we went back and he forwarded me a picture from an organic milk company. And it had vitamin A palmitate that was on the carton that was there. And I was like, you're kidding me. So I typed it into the app from the grocery store, and I'm like, no kidding. And it was another preservative that caused slow dose but long-term potential cancerous effects inside the body. It was as bad as potassium bromate. I was like, this is crazy. And this is, again, marketed as organic whole food milk. And so every time, because now we have a tool that is like crystal clear. I mean, it's like Bahama water clear, right? As far as the information that you get from it, we now have a tool that we can use it at disposal and protect ourselves and make better choices in real time. And if you don't do it for yourself, what I tell everybody is do it for your children or your grandchildren, because they deserve a better go, not ignorance because we think it's okay because it's marketed well.
So with the app, talking about people having, taking specific drugs and being able to put that in and see what that can lead to a deficiency. Mm-hmm. What about somebody like myself? I don't really take any drugs. I do take a couple different supplements, very few. Really right now, about the only thing that I'm really that focused on using is the topical glutathione that one of our affiliates has put together, and the stuff is awesome. And when there's copper, it is a copper peptide that I got to try. They haven't released it to the public yet, but it literally removed it was a dark spot. I think it now could have been something like a melanoma or something like that. Maybe precancerous kind of thing, but it just like scaled it up and it just fell off like a scab. But so somebody who maybe doesn't take anything, and just they're eating their diet, and obviously even eating a healthy, so-called air quotes for the people that are listening, diet. Can be unhealthy because it could just be depleted of all the nutrients and everything else. So how does the app work for them? I'm hearing also that maybe, you could be eating that kind of diet, but you can take it to the grocery store and you see something on a label and you can look that up and it can tell you kind of what effects it's going to have on your body. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I did with it. And again, so the reason why I did that, and I'll give you a very short story in this one. I had a client who was over and mentally, he was pretty banged up. And the reason I was like, what's going on? So he told me the story, and his oldest son was then prescribed Ritalin for ADHD. And I went, okay, like, what are we doing, man? Why didn't you ask me, or I could have helped you? So I went out there, and I know we didn't talk about it, but I developed the mushroom product line. So they're organic, whole food, functional mushrooms. And I looked at it and I said, why don't we do this? I go, anyone who's been led to believe, and that's a key phrase, who's been led to believe that they have X, it's just a deficiency or it's an emotional distress pattern. It's one of the two. And that's where a lot of this has to intersect as well. The emotions are tricky. They're very crafty. And because if you think it's called autosuggestion, Emil Coué. Have you heard of Emil Coué before?
I have not.
Yeah, so Dr. Emil Coué came from France, came over to the States, and he talked to people about autosuggestion. Dr. Fleet did it in the concept theory practice, where chiropractors use all the time, that once you believe something, then that will manifest itself. Dr. Wayne Dyer, who's one of my digital mentors, I never met him personally, but he says, be careful what you think, because what you think will show up. And his most popular phrase was, be careful what you think about, because once you realize what you think about shows up, you're real careful about what you think about. And I was like, wow. So I'm really careful with words. I'm very truthful, but I really am very careful about autosuggestion and saying, well, be careful of this, because what ends up happening mentally with this, Jeff, is that if I say, and even here, I'm not going to do it because I don't even want to put that picture in your mind. But let's say there was an avatar of you to your left, and that person's name was David Jiff, right? We can make it all up. And I went, hey, David Jiff, if you don't rub that area consistently, even though that scabbed up and went away, it could come back. You're hearing that for the other person. Well, what's the image that comes into your head? It's a sense of fear, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't want that to happen, so we have to be really careful about the words that we use and what's coming up there. So the information that's in the app and how people use it is you enter the information and it'll tell you what deficiencies it will cause. It's not going to say it's going to do this. It's what deficiencies it's going to cause. That's it. We just don't want deficiencies. We want to optimize. We want not more, we want balance, which is why I call my company Balance. Because too much, just like apoptosis, is going to cause a whole set of other issues. So that answer the question?
Yeah, perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you emphasize, go ahead. What was that?
I was going to say, so when we put together like our mushroom stacks, we make sure that it's whole food, organic, functional mushrooms. And the reason why we did it that way is because the body has to know how to evacuate it. So for example, if you have, we make our own bread at the house, and I use King Arthur's, and it's hard red wheat. There's absolutely zero preservatives, zero iron, zero additives to that flour. It's incredible. But I know when I eat that bread, not only am I satiated and full, but I know I'm going to be able to go to the bathroom easy. Okay. Now, if I go out, and this is something that really, which is why I went out and I bought my own bread maker, it really irritated me, is I started noticing on the food labels that in small print was bioengineered food. So when we give meal plans to folks, we have what we call a buying guide. So we're teaching people how to approach, think, and then buy their food. So that way, because again, if I'm being called all day, I'm not going to be effective. I can't help people because I'm going to be focusing too much on a small subset of people. So with that, all that information that's out there, we're teaching people how to do it appropriately. So they're saying, oh, this is what I need to buy, how I need to buy it. And then they can then rinse and repeat it for themselves and then teach it to someone else who they love and then move on. It's an awful business model, but it's the right way of doing it. And that's what my whole message is about. And if we can get back to our practices before, when in the earlier days, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, where we knew where our food was coming from, we didn't eat too much, it's going to change everything. And that was the first question before we started recording, I know. But that's what's going to move the needle for all of us. And that's our only way out, in my opinion. If we keep relying on AI, if we keep relying on different things that are out there. I am a TikTok user. I love TikTok. TikTok's great because you get a lot of real conversations and people are exposing a lot of stuff out there. And one thing I saw earlier this morning was that ChatGPT and the different AIs, they want to satisfy you. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are not talking about is you can train these things to talk about and display what they want you to hear and to see. So it's great marketing, it's great entertainment. So you have to just be really diligent and careful about what you're hearing and seeing, and ask questions. Just be curious, like a child, and say, okay, cool, show me, prove it, show me how. Yeah. And if they can't, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, we have to assume that the information we are getting is flawed, and we're not being taught that. We're raising a generation that just relies on Google and other search engines, using AI to present them with the easiest available information, and that's not always the most correct information. And so we have to dig deeper. We have to ask the harder questions, and we have to be trained to be able to challenge things. I mean, I tell my students, it's like, I don't know everything. I'm learning as I go, and don't believe everything I tell you, because more than likely I'm wrong.
My mentor, John, told me, he says, look, Socrates, once you realize you know one more thing than the next guy, you realize you know nothing.
Right.
But that one thing that you know, no one knows shit.
Right.
It's all made up. We only know from our experience, from what that worked. And one of my internal self gauges is, if it feels light, I'm all in. If it feels heavy and resistive, I'm like, I'm out. That's really what it comes down to. But the other thing I tell folks a lot too, this is really interesting. A long time ago, I was always asking the question, I said, why is it this whole mindset thing? Where did this whole mindset thing come from? And then it hit me that the mind cannot be clear if the body is not well. And I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder why there's so much stuff everywhere, because everybody's literally in fight or flight, because their body is distressed, or there's some kind of emotional pattern that they never dealt with from a childhood trauma, or a mixture or combination of the both. And then when you're holistically approaching both of them collectively, the low-hanging fruit is to deal with the body. It's like going and starting working out. Well, the hardest part of working out is putting on your sneakers. Once you put your sneakers on, you're usually pretty good to go, right? And then after that, you're able to move past. And how many people have ever said they worked out and they didn't feel good when they were done? Unless, of course, they ever did it and they ran a 100-mile race or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where all this comes from. So going back to the app and what we did with the mushrooms, and then what we did with this information for people, we wanted to give it a 1, 2, 3 process to move their health needle quick. So that way they have the information, make sure they understand the information, and then application to the information that they can move their health needle. So I'm going from where they are, which is where they don't want to be, to living a life that's free of synthetics as closely as possible. Now, I will say there are some medications that are out there, or there's some situations that are out there where some people do need medications because they're too far into it. And that would be like an Alzheimer's or a Parkinson's type patient, something like that, because there's just too much overload in the body. When I looked at a client who had Alzheimer's, and I figured out 2 different things with them. One, I feel like and this is just through experience, this is not based on any research or data, but I feel like people who have Alzheimer's have a condition called pica. And their body is so overloaded. Because I said, what's going on at home? What's happening? And they said, they won't stop eating. They just keep eating all day. They're eating, they're picking. They're always in the cabinet, in the pantry. And I was like, really? And what I found is that they're so nutrient depleted that the body, just like someone who has pica, is looking for anything. And they could look at a pile of rocks and goes, I don't know what it is, but those rocks, man, they have exactly what I need. And they're going to keep eating and eating and eating, which causes that dysbiosis to get even worse, which then accelerates the condition. So fasting for people who are in the 4 horsemen, the Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, or cancer, is absolutely critical. That's the fastest way to help them manage where they are. And then the other one that I found, this is all based on studies, and I'm very hopeful for this type of research that's coming out, is that psilocybin combined with lion's mane, what Paul Stamets is doing is really showing some positive treatment outcomes for people who are under that category. So again, and the reason why it captured my attention is it's a mushroom and it's grown from mycelium. And I'm like, no wonder why, because if you look at what psilocybin's doing digestively, it's delivering serotonin and dopamine. And if you look at those people in that classification, whether it be Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, dementia, they don't have any serotonin or dopamine, which is why all of a sudden they kind of bounce out of it and go, oh my gosh, I feel great, based on the studies that Paul Stamets released.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the potentials for psilocybin, and that's become kind of a bit of a theme on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to explore its benefits, not only for just our emotional and psychological well-being, but the other health benefits that kind of come along with that. And we also talk a lot on this podcast about transactional versus transformational aging. Transformational aging is really, I think, the theme that I've entered into in this 5th season. And how do you see AI-based nutrition replenishment fitting into that larger shift, moving us from transactional to transformational, from reactive fixes to more proactive transformation?
I don't buy it at all. And here's why I don't buy it. AI is great and it's good as long as you code it with your information that you trust and you verified and validated. If you haven't done the work, I wouldn't trust it. There is a lot of propaganda. It's just too much information and it's not distrustful. How do you know? So I go in there curious as a cat. I just hope I don't fall off the building 9 times, right? But I go in there with this being curious as a cat. We should be basing our food and our nutrition on how we feel, period. We are the ultimate intelligence that God ever created. And AI is an important tool that was given to us as a tool, but only if we use the tool with our information. Now, if someone, let's say you and I developed our own app and we utilized AI and and we showed and proved where we got the information from, then yeah, I would say we can put a business together and people can subscribe to that business and they can trust it. But unless people are using that level of discernment, I definitely would not trust any AI unless you know the people who had programmed it and put it together. How we feel, Neville Goddard wrote the book, Feeling is a Secret. I probably have read that book now. I think the last time someone asked me, it was like 50. I probably at like 54, 55. I read it all the time. I have it in audio, I have it in Kindle, and I have it in physical. And I just go through is how you feel. Because as soon as you realize that what you think about shows up, like that's a real belief statement. And I know I don't have it in front of me here, but your belief system leads to your imagination and your thought, which is why I was really careful about that auto-suggestion thing that I was speaking about. So what your belief leads to your imagination, that imagination then leads to your physiology, what you're going to experience in your body. And that physiology then leads to your experience. So your belief system directly correlates your experience. And your experience forms your belief system. And that's the cycle that happens. So if we are relying too much on AI, because then we're getting grounded with it on the marketing level, we're forgetting our own innate intelligence and our own intuition, our own perceptions. Our 15 senses that we're given by the ultimate AI that's ever been out there. And we forget that way too much. And if for those people who are not religious or spiritual, it doesn't really matter. There is an intelligence that's out there, whatever you name it. AI is new. That is eons old. Which one are you going to believe?
So I might have misphrased the question a little bit because I was kind of referring to, and I want to go back to this question and try and tie it together, because somebody who might just have listened and said, wait a minute, you have an AI-based nutrient, deficiency software, and you've just totally negated what you've been saying. And so I want to just allow you to kind of clarify that. So what I'm looking at is kind of how do you see a software like your own that has this AI basis to it, how does that help us to make that larger shift from the reactive to the more proactive transformation?
Yeah. Okay. So what I was just speaking about, I was talking about AI, using AI for meal plans and food, like that telling us what we should eat, right?
Okay.
That's not what the app does at all. The app is not designed to say, you should eat this. It's telling you what's in X, or if, again, like lisinopril, for example, it's removing X from the body. It's removing the B6, the CoQ12, et cetera. So we don't want to deplete anything. We want to optimize it. So that's, I guess, to clarify it, that's exactly how I use and why I built the AI. So I designed it to show us what was being depleted from if we ingested anything synthetically. Now, I definitely would not trust AI to tell me what to eat. I'm going to go out and I'm going to go eat food that, one, is aligned, like a functional blood-based food. I'm not a big fan of keto. I'm a big fan of blood type, and I'm also a big fan of Weston A. Price. I think they've gotten the closest to that. Weston A. Price, in my mind, is the closest to Mediterranean because it's more Blue Zone based. So those right there are where I would focus my eating patterns. I definitely would have way more fish than I have with red meat. Meat organs, yeah. Not, again, a big fan of that because, again, they're eating from the land. The land is potentially, all the chemicals. People can say the same thing with mercury at the same time. The thing here, and this is a little bit off the topic, is I bless my food. And I rely on that a lot. And I'm 51. I would say I'm doing pretty good at the moment, knock on wood, God willing, of course. And when I bless my food, I don't do it in a way, I do it in a way that's very humbling and grateful. So I imagine whoever prepared the food, or if I prepared it myself, I have like a white glow over it. And the people who fished for that food, or that one piece of fish, or the people who harvested those crops, they did it with love and joy in their heart. And I imagine as the people were delivering that to the trucks that delivered to the stores, or if I picked it from my own yard when my wife brought it in from the yard into the house, that it was done with joy and done with love. And before it enters our body, that it delivers what we need for it. That's how I go about food. That's how I use the AI with all of this. So I'll make an AI show me based on the data as far as what medications or synthetics that are out there, what they're going to deplete from my body. I don't want to deplete anything. And then what I'm eating, as far as the foods that I'm choosing to eat, how does it make me feel after I eat? If it makes me feel lousy, it's gone really quick. If it makes me feel great, I usually double down, but I also make sure I don't eat too much of it because I know that's a personal tendency of mine. If something's good, like, oh man, I'm going back for seconds. Maybe I'll go back for one more and then go get a nice little third on it. So that answer a little bit better?
Yeah, that clarifies it because I think really what I'm hearing is that the AI can always be a tool to help us get the information. Mm-hmm. But if we allow it to be transactional, it's making the decisions for us, and it's not accounting for the individual variations among us, our own personal situation, and it becomes very much reactional as opposed to more transformative. And what you're attempting to do is to use AI in a way of gathering the information that can be applied specifically to an individual and help them to make the changes. And those changes are going to be a process that takes time, takes effort, it takes transformation. It takes us, changing our behaviors in ways that are incrementally going to reverse what incrementally got us in the position we are.
Yeah. The key word there is willing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I use that word a lot with a lot of folks. I go, are you willing? And if the answer is no, then I'm usually like, then I don't know if I can help you. Yeah. If they are willing, then it moves on. So the one, I know we spoke about this briefly earlier, but the person who had that diabetic wound, slow and steady wins the race. If you were to dump all your knowledge, you're a doctor, onto somebody, they would go, whoa. hold up horsey. It gets too fast, too much, too quick. They wouldn't be able to manage the content and the information, and then how to assimilate everything that you just shared with them, right? And there are a lot of people who are not into what you and I are into every day. So, and again, it can become daunting and intimidating because there is a lot of information, especially with all the disinformation that's in the culture right now. So I go, look, start off with water. Well, what is water? Oh, okay. Well, keep drinking and let me know how you feel, right? And then we introduced the salts. Then we introduced food that have high density of cellular salts. And they go, I don't know what it is, but why do I feel so great? Like, I don't feel like I have to drink as much water anymore, and I'm not thirsty. So, for example, we've been talking now for a little bit over an hour, actually an hour and 40 minutes. I haven't taken a sip of water, and I'm not thirsty. That's an indication of proper hydration inside the body, right? So as going back to that one client of mine, then we just keep building up on that, and we're slowly ramping them up to the point where they own it, they understand it, and they can integrate it into their lifestyle because that now is their new lifestyle. They've used the AI, so when they become curious, or if someone's suggesting something, so this was an absolute needle mover for this one person. They loved Celsius drinks. I said, oh, interesting. Have you used the app with Celsius? No, you can do that? Yeah. Just go get some of the things that are on the label and start typing them in. Instead of doing that, stop drinking Celsius. and that's how we use the tool. So we're using it as an information base. And then now but I didn't mention yet, and this is the real key part. So we talked about the regulatory stuff that's inside the app, and I forgot about this part, and I can't believe that I did it. So excuse me. But at the bottom on point 14, regardless of whatever string of medications or synthetics that you give the AI, it provides you all the citations of where the information came from. So and this is why I integrated NIH and PubMed for all the peer-reviewed studies and Hippocrates, because that's where all the citations are coming from. So if someone wants to challenge anybody with it, I welcome it all day. I'm like, not only do they give the regulations, but I'm also giving the citations of where the information's been peer-reviewed, which is I apologize for not explaining that a little bit earlier, but it's all there under each search, regardless of whatever it is. So if someone's looking, say, well, where's this? How do I know? Well, that's how they know. And then they can go into that search and read about that study, and they can summarize that study as well. And I have to be careful there because that's where some people get really, really confused, because those studies are at a different language. They're for scientists and people like you and I who understand how to read them. But that's another part, a major part of the application that makes it a complete game changer for the industry.
And I think it's important for us as a population to get a little bit more scientifically literate and being able to read those things. I mean, it's something I don't think our young people are being taught well enough how to read critically the literature that's out there, because, you know, I can go off on a rant about the 250 some odd studies that I read during COVID about the role of exercise and body composition and all those things on how sick people had gotten during that and how little that was being taught. And reading some of these studies, and it's just like, this is crap. And then you realize, wait a minute, this wasn't even peer reviewed. This is a pre-publication version of this article. Yeah. And so people really need to be critical in what they're reading. And we can't be getting our information from just the popular press, which tends to take one article, and, you know, you could take one study and tell everybody, hey, you know, an hour, a glass of wine a night is like an hour at the gym. Well, not really. It's not. But yeah. And so as we kind of wrap this up a little bit, one of the questions I always ask of all my guests are, what are you doing personally to age well?
Less, not more.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have some folks who don't like oats, for example, right? Now, there's zeolites out in the market, and I don't like dancing around questions, but I like answering questions with stories because it makes it more applicable to, oh, I can do that too, right? You can go out and buy a zeolite. A zeolite has been used for, at least it's been marketed and pushed as being used for eons. Mayans, Romans use it to help clean the water. Now, zeolite is a natural quartz crystal. Quartz crystals are part of the rock bed. So when water moves down the hill and through the stream, it's rolling over the rock bed, and it also has direct sunlight, and it's acting like a copper pipe. So it's antimicrobial, etc., viral, all that kind of stuff. So, okay, but now we put it into a bottle. So you can take a zeolite, and a zeolite's marketed to get rid of the PFAS, so the forever chemicals that are out there, okay? So the first thing I ask is that instead of going to a bottle, what do I have as an option for food that would do the same thing? Now, there's a lot of information out there about how to remove PFAS, either using mycelium or using oats. So we have this beautiful store down the road. It's called the Old Mill in Oak Ridge, North Carolina. And I go out there and I buy 20 pounds of oats every month. And I have oats. So for my forever chemical removal for my body, for example, I ferment my oats. So I heat them up, I put them in a jar that's sealed tight, put them in the fridge, I eat them in the morning, and I also make sure that my fruit is newly picked or as close to newly picked as possible, and I have my fresh duck eggs. And that's my breakfast, and I have incredible amounts of salt. I'm talking probably like my hand's big, and I have about half of my hand full of salt, and that's my breakfast alone. I'm really particular about what I eat and what I ingest. I don't drink alcohol. If I'm in an area where there's smoking, I'll leave. So I'm making decisions because the fitness game is over. The longevity game is the game at this point. The push in the longevity game right now is all these peptides and all these different things. But the answer is, were those available? Had those not been available, what else could you do and would you do? And that's the questions that I solved. So I live my life today on making sure that I have foods that mimic the exact same thing, because those products, they're not bad, but I'd rather do it naturally before I reach for something that was manufactured. That's my own approach. And that's the honest answer that I would recommend anyone first. Now, if that doesn't work, or it's too difficult, or there's something else that needs to be considered, then sure, use the technology. The technology, as long as it's safe and it's proven effective, and there's peer-reviewed citations that support that claim, absolutely, go ahead and do that. But that's how I'm about going through everything. And then the other thing is, when it comes to my personal fitness and working out, I don't know if you've ever tried this before. If you haven't, check out Mace bars. Completely changed the entire game. They're absolutely incredible. The number one movement pattern that I tell everyone to go through, I don't call exercise or fitness and exercise anymore. It's just movement patterns. I'm like multi-joint, multi-factor movement pattern. So it's basically a PNF pattern over and over. You want everything to work as a whole system, because that's how the evacuation system works and moves. So the Mace bar puts together the entire thoracic and cervical spine in relation to the the spinal column, in relation to the shoulder girdles, and then the sternocleidomastoids, and then the breathing patterns of the body. When you tie all that together, I mean, it changed my entire posture. It changed everything for me. How I chew, how I breathe, how I handle anxiety, just with a Mace bar alone. And then I'll couple that with another like multi-joint sequence pattern, whether it's like pull-ups, bear crawls. Bear crawls are incredible. When I was playing football at Northeastern, I was a linebacker, and my defensive coordinator would say, until we win a championship, you have to do 100-yard bear crawls up and back with full gear. So we got strong really, really quick. And if you look at and we had to do them a certain way. We had to go ass low, make sure we were like, think of Spider-Man walking up a building vertically, but horizontally on a field. I have everyone doing bear crawls. Low back pain gone, breathing issues gone, neck issues gone. Because if you look at a spine, just on a Google image, something like that, right? If you were to get the cervical spine and the lumbar spine and flip them, the only thing that's really different is one's thicker than the other one. That's it. So if mobily you have good movement between the sacrum, lumbar joints, then you're also going to have a nice movement pattern between the OA joint, C1, and also the skull. Everything is going to be free and nimble and moving around. It unlocks everything. Not right away, but within 3 up to 7 days, anything that you're going through, I mean, literally it's gone. So when you couple that with the Mace bar, And then some. My favorite leg exercise as far as for leg strength is a horse stance. If you can do a 3-set, 5-minute horse stance in a row, of course, you'd work your way up to that 5 minutes. Game changer. That's from the old shaman monks. And I would look at how they moved, because they didn't have gyms and all these different parts of exercise. They used stones and wood planks and things that were off balance. And what they would do is they would go into a calisthenic-based position in relation to breathing and core development. And that's how they would become incredibly strong. And so I took all that kind of stuff together, and I said, okay, well, how else can we change it up? So I go up on my toes a lot, I go up on my fingertips a lot, and then I start incorporating fascia. So very, very simple things. They're difficult, but you work your way up there. So my workouts are maybe 20 minutes. That's it. When I eat food, I'm really being very picky and choosy about how can I move the needle on the longevity game with really good, clean food, and what's it going to do to remove toxins from my body. So the toxins are being removed from food, not something external that's been marketed to do it for me. That's how I live my life.
Very simple. Yeah. And some of those, actually, like the mace bar and stuff, I've wanted to kind of incorporate some of that kind of stuff, but I'm just kind of limited in space that I have, that I couldn't be able to swing those around. At 6'5", and I work out in my garage, I couldn't swing a mace bar, but I do a lot with like, I don't have the ceiling heights, and it just, if I'd swing those around, I would be hitting something. So I do the Bulgarian bag a lot.
Oh, those are great. Those are awesome.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I do too with the mace bar to get some extra room there is I go just outside. So I have some space on I had a little bit of what I call an advantage. I live slightly down a hill. So when I bear crawl, I'm bear crawling up and then I'm bear crawling down, which adds that little complexity of resistance based on like just gravity. So I like it personally. When my wife started doing this stuff with me, she's like, you're out of your mind. And I go, I'm telling you, it really works. Now, if you saw her today, and I'm not kidding, she'll laugh when she hears this podcast. She's like, 3 days in, she was crying. She was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. Now she's like looking forward to it because she gets the absolute best workouts in less than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing too with the whole movement stuff is like, people don't have a lot of time, but they want to get strong and they want to live well. They don't have to think about this stuff all the time. I don't want to think about this stuff all the time. I'm sure you don't either. And I'm like, how can I do it faster, but still get the result that I want,
So, let's see. What I'd ask, what else haven't we talked about? But we'd be on probably for another 3 hours. So, got to kind of wrap it up here. But where can our guests? You mentioned that they could get the app, and they can also find the same information on your website. Can you kind of reiterate where to find the website, where to find the app for our viewers and listeners?
Everything's on our website. It's balancednaturopathics.com. I also hyperlink my name, scotteburgess.com, so everything will go to the same site. Whether it's different meal plans, the app, if you go into the free app, it's right there on the nav bar, and go into web portal. So if you want to use the web portal for the application, if you have a Google or a Linux-based device, if you have an iOS, just click on the link that says download for iOS, so you can get everything right there. The mushrooms are on there as well. We don't push mushrooms a lot. We suggest them if you need them, when you need them. And if you want to learn about that, or if someone wants to understand, and give me your address too, Jeff. I'll send you some, please. I'd love for you to try them. We have one product, which is, it's legitimate. It's awesome. You ever seen the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper?
Mm-hmm.
We've made the real life Limitless with a product that we call Lock-In. And it really does unlock where you get dialed in, focused, and we use it a lot for people who have initial onset of high levels of anxiety. And we use that to help bridge the gap between point A to point B, B being where they want to be, just so they don't feel anxious. And by the time they get there, again, they can keep buying if they want to, but we don't even suggest it because they're doing so well at that point. It would be me just trying to money gouge, and I don't do that stuff. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So this has been an awesome conversation. I've learned so much, and I think it's underscored a lot of what we talk about here on the Aging Well podcast. We'll probably have to have you back on at some point to dive into some of these points a little bit deeper. But I just really appreciate your time coming on the podcast today. Keep doing what you're doing and keep aging well.
I appreciate it. I'll give you a little hint, something that we're working on. Maybe this will be a nice prelude for the next episode. We have another app coming out we're calling MedPath. And it's a genomic forecasting model for medications. So this is what the insurance companies know. They know that if you have X medication being ingested, that eventually it will lead to X result. We just have to make sure we have the right data, the right information, the right sourcing, and the right calculations to not say that this will happen, but the path and potentials of where you could go as a result of taking those meds. So that's something that we're working on right now, which I'm really excited about.
Sounds exciting. Well, we're looking forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, for sure. Jeff, you've been great. Thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.